disturbing is the two things that Mr. Trump has said. One is that he will not disown what is called white majority, white supremacy, as it's called, because he was not willing to condemn it. And not only that, he went on to say that, I'm asking the boys to hold back and wait. That kind of a statement. And the other was that he did not believe in any kind of transfer of power. It may not be necessary because I'll myself be there. If not, we will make sure something else happens, etc. So these show very fundamental deficiency in the system. And let us hope it will not happen, whatever the circumstances are. And whatever the legal disputes are will be resolved in the court and not lead to a revolt. And that is what is more worrying about people. People have started moving out of New York. Many people are moving out of New York for fear of some kind of a clash on the streets. And this is something very, very serious. So people obviously have these hesitations and worries about president's intentions. So that will be a worse tragedy than president himself winning the election. So therefore, let us hope and pray that this kind of happens. But I haven't understood the complexity of what Mr. Deshmukh said about the ballot and the others. What is going to create the problem? The votes are votes, whether it's counted this way or that. But if there are more votes, more ballots vote becomes decisive, it becomes a complication. That is what you were suggesting. But anyway, that's something which we have to see. To me, it was not very clear why it should be so, unless somebody provokes it. Like when President Trump has been saying that he will question it. So that questioning, whether it will start from a particular contingency, or it can happen anyway. Now it's about 5 million people have voted, maybe more have voted today. And therefore, are we reaching that tipping point between the ballot, the postal ballots and the registered voters? This is not very clear. I don't know whether Mr. Deshmukh would like to clarify this a little more. Thank you.
Yashwant, you can clarify on that point made by Srinivas.
I just wanted to understand. I didn't get the last line clearly. What Ambassador said. Srinivasan, just wanted to understand precisely what was the question last line that you wanted to.
No, you said that in certain circumstances the challenge will be more serious, right? It depends on how the number of votes in ballot, postal ballot, and number of votes, registered votes, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of proportion is going to create the problem?
The proportion that is having a problem is that, number of postal ballots that have been issued, as requested or issued, they are counted on the request, as well as particularly the states, big number of states who have issued postal ballot to each and every one. So what it means is that in particular, suppose in a certain state, the last turnout or expected turnout is about 60%. I'm just giving a hypothetical scenario. But because 100% postal ballots have been issued, the number of postal ballots that have been issued, that obviously will become a record. But what is more critical, how many of those issued actually have been returned? And that is where I am kind of finding it a bit intrigued, the way people are getting hyper on the number of people who are taking part in record numbers as such. The event, as we are talking, the number of, say, 25 or 26 million, whatever the number could be today, I mean, in totality, that have been already cast. A sizable number of them is coming from 3 massive states where the concentration is like of 100% postal ballot right now, where everybody has been issued, like California, New York, and Texas. If you look into it, almost half of those trends are coming from 3 states alone. So what I'm simply trying to say is that the number of the ballots that have been issued, they are in record simply because in biggest number of states, everybody has been issued a postal ballot, But critically, what percentage of that is actually sending it back? That is one thing. Second thing, as we all know, 4 years back, Hillary Clinton, did win the national vote by 2 points. And that victory of 2 points meant nothing because of electoral college composition. And that 2 point also had a massive role of her really super strong states that are deep blue states where we have massive population sizes. So if suppose Mr. Biden gets 10 points more than what Ms. Clinton polled in California, that is not going to change the number of electoral college seats from California. So I am finding a bit difficult to analyze too much into this national lead. First of all, this 10-point, 12-point lead that everybody is projecting is not coming from likely voters. It is mostly in the registered voters. And there is a gap in there, number one. Number two, what I'm finding it troubling is that the entire way this election is proceeding, the 3 sections, early voting by postal ballots, early voting in person, and on election voting in person, the 3 segments, the segment number 3 and 2 are unlikely to be challenged in legal ways. But the first one is where the trouble is. I have genuine doubts that the number of people who have got the mails and number of people who have requested the mails, postal ballots, the number of returns are going to be justifying the historic turnout story eventually. I am finding a gap in there. That's what my red flagging is, and we will know in about because in few days, because United States Postal Services has said that they need somewhere between 2 to 5 days even for the express post to come in. So for the express post to deliver and express post to come in. So basically we are talking about roughly about 10 days, and which means practically speaking 10 days in reverse counting from 3rd of November. These are the gray area period where nobody actually knows how many actually have been posted, how many have been returned, and how many made the return on the legitimate cutoff date. These are the gray areas, and that's a massive gray area, and particularly in terms of swing states, they are going to be counted. Pennsylvania, yesterday our data and other data was suggesting that the lead is almost like 8 or 9 points. Exactly the similar lead was being set 4 years back. And what happened? So when you put into the gray area of these 10 days into that kind of scenario of what the polls suggest in their drawing room or on their laptops and the actual polling, we need to be careful. That's where I'm red flagging.
Okay, thank you.
Vinitha, you can.
Yeah, I have a question to Mr. Deshmukh. What do you have to say about Trump's rhetoric on voter fraud? A lot of people are voting in large numbers, mail-in ballot this time because of the COVID pandemic situation. But there are lots of people who are voting in person because of what President Trump keeps on talking about this fraud. Where is the evidence?
There is no evidence. Obviously, there is no evidence because we know for sure there are 3 states who even in 2016 election went for 100% postal ballot. By law, they took it. So there is no evidence. And that's a weird argument. But it tells you the thought process of the man. It tells you where exactly he is sensing he can create it. The reason why he is saying it all the time and the reason why we see majority of the Republicans are not really opting for postal ballot. They are opting either for in-person early voting or for the majority of them are opting for the in-person voting on the 3rd of November. because they know for sure, their strategists know for sure in legal terms, that is the least challengeable ballot. And they are leaving out the most challengeable ballot, which the Democrats are opting for, in leaps and bounds. So what I am saying is that this man, who is probably the conspiracy theorist, president of all the conspiracy theorists under the sun, this man has I'm feeling that he has many things up his sleeves in legal terms. He knows where he is going to challenge. You know what this means to have an additional Supreme Court justice on the in Supreme Court. You know what it means to have a 6-3 number. So what we are looking into is a very, very devious plan, or at least attempt, and a very well calculated strategy of asking your supporters, please vote in person, don't go for a postal ballot, because we are going to challenge the postal ballots. We are going to ensure that it gets dragged on. So it's the way I feel, it's a well-devised strategy, and this is where my concerns are. And unlike the states have 100% postal ballot kind of a law, rest of the states, I seriously doubt that it will go unchallenged. And you know it for sure, Veeta, that along with that there are the congressional elections. So
That's
the litigations are not going to be one for the presidential elections. Litigations are going to be for hundreds of those congressional seats, and multiply with that the hundreds of other votes. Because in India, many people don't know how the US election system works. Arun, the US election is not just one single ballot. In many counties, it runs into hundreds of pages. We give you a ballot, it looks put like a thumb on your table, because there are votes. Yeah, there are votes right from whether we should have a children's park in this corner or that corner, starting from that to making marijuana legal, to gun control, to what not. There are sometimes hundreds of ballots in the same ballot, and US president's ballot is just one of those ballots. It's one of those ballots. So when you are making a litigation, when you are trying to get something embroidered in the legal problem, there are 100 elections out there to do that in the same ballot. And if one goes in, the entire ballot goes in. So I can sense it that this overtly campaign that, this postal ballot is fraud, don't go for postal ballot, and total campaign on asking your supporters to go in person. That is by design. It's not just by default. I believe that is by design.
Srinivas sir, you can, because Yashwant has responded to you now. If anything, we are going to round it up. So one quick, your part, Srinivas sir.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
No, we are closing it down, so you can make some points as a final roundup on the elections.
That's your job. You are the chairperson.
No. I mean your point. I will round it up, but you can make one more final statement.
No. I think we are all agreed on most of the aspects of the election. I think Mr. Deshmukh was particularly eloquent, and I listened to him very carefully, and I realized that he understood all the implications of the situation, both political as well as factual and procedural. And that was great help, and I learned a lot from it. Even though why the postal ballots could create so much confusion is something maybe we are imagining, and also because of President Trump's explanations. So the question is here whether this election will actually work as some kind of a referendum on the presidency of Donald Trump. That is what matters. And I would think that poetic justice demands, as you know, poetic justice is a device by which you determine who gets the punishment and who gets the rewards. You know, that's a literary device with which you allocate rewards and punishments. So if that is how this is going to be, then it is clearly the poetic justice demands that there should be a change. But whether it will apply in the same manner in the present very complicated elections in the US, we do not know. So that is the only unknown factor. So if somebody was to take up the benefits of the Donald Trump's presidency and the deficiencies and weigh and see which was which, but that may not be possible at this time because it is very highly emotional and highly high-strung kind of atmosphere in the United States because of the pandemic, the economic situation, as well as the race situation. So many other factors will come into this. And I agree with Mr. Deshmukh that the Indian Americans will not change very much. Indian Americans have a let's say, emotional link with India, but they need not necessarily always think about India-US relations. That may not be a factor. It is a new development. I remember when Mrs. Gandhi declared the emergency, the biggest opposition to her came from the US, Indian Americans. And when we tested in 1998, the biggest support came from the Indian Americans in the US. It is not because one was Mrs. Gandhi and the other was Mr. Vajpayee, but they went by their standards, like any Indian American who comes to India will say, oh, how come that there are only two lanes in the traffic? How come we don't have better roads? Why is it that people are throwing plastic on the streets? You know, that kind of an unrealistic kind of approach arising out of ignorance. And therefore, they needed to be educated. With the India caucus in the Congress and the Friends of India in the Senate and so on, we have accomplished a lot. I mean, the embassy and the government of India. So we have educated them a lot on these issues. And particularly the second generation Indians have no complaints against India. The problem with the first generation is they have some complaint. They had to go away because they couldn't get a proper job or proper education. Or when they came back, somebody broke his whiskey bottle. This kind of complaints they always have. Customs are bad. And that kind of feeling the second generation doesn't have. They have, for them, India is a brand, which helps them. Because if you are an Indian, you are likely to get a better job in San Jose than if you are an American. And that kind of brand has been built up. And so the younger generation is fairly positive again towards India. While the older ones have these complaints and there's too much corruption in India, too much this, that, and the other. And they are not very, very charitable most of the time. But when it comes to voting, they also know that it is the Republicans who have done some solid work with India. If you look back at history from Eisenhower onwards, and George Bush, the nuclear deal and so on, Republicans have done some good for India. And President Trump also has not been anti-Indian nor prejudicial to India. So the sentiment towards the Democrats is not based on any kind of objective criteria. And that will last. And I agree entirely that Indian American politicians try to erase not to erase, but at least suppress. Why is Bobby Jindal Bobby Jindal? He has another name. he has a Hindu name, but he specifically said that, I'm an American. And that is the same attitude that she has also taken, Kamala has taken. She says, I'm a Black American. So it's not that she is just a woman candidate for the vice presidency, but also a Black woman, which gives her a higher profile than what she gets as a South Asian or a Caribbean origin person. And so, but as everybody pointed out, the Indians are quite excited about Kamala Harris. put it that way, the expectation that she might become a president of the United States. We used to talk about Indian Americans, wanting only to be doctors. There is this great joke about, the swearing in of an Indian American as president of the United States. And his mother was sitting in the audience. And somebody went up to her and said, "Oh, you must be very proud that your son is the president of the United States today." So she laughed and said, "What is so much in that? His brother is a doctor." so, so that was the ultimate dream of every Indian American. And that is now shifting. And a lot of people are contesting elections. And there are people with greater involvement with India and understanding with Indian community. But look at the white people who have been so supportive of India. There are so many. Frank Pallone, for example. I think he dedicated his entire congressional work for India. And he was not swayed by anything that happened. Indians may have changed sides, but he never changed. And so we cannot say that it is the non-white Americans who will be supportive of us. White Americans have also been supportive for various reasons. So I think we all agree that it is difficult to predict, even as psephologists like Mr. Deshmukh was not wanting to put his neck on the neck out to say that so-and-so will win. And that will be very difficult to say. But I must say I am one of those, together with him, who wrote in the Hindu in November 2016 that Trump might win. And the Hindu printed it as a contrarian view. So I hope they will not print my article this time as a contrarian view. They may say it's more of a consensus view that Biden might be the president of the United States. And my key point is, if it is poetic justice, if it is a judgment on his performance, then it is likely that he is likely to lose. Other factors come in, then we cannot say. Thank you very much anyway for this very good discussion and very able people that you brought to this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivan sir. It was a nice roundup from your part. I will now ask Yashwant to chip in with a few words so that we could finish it off. Yashwant.
I said after this just wonderful words by Ambassador Srinivasan, I mean, there is hardly anything to add. Probably we are just enjoying the limelight. Honestly speaking, for the first time in US elections, Indians are being talked a lot. I mean, in terms of not just about the candidacy of Kamala Harris, but also because of the obvious reasons that they seem to have arrived now and with all the right positionings and credentials. I guess that we are discussing this more because we have seen that shift from liberal to conservative side in UK politics, but that had a predictable line. We know for sure that in UK, majority of the Indian origin voters were very much Labour, towards the Labour, but it took a certain Mr. Corbyn to be decisively anti-India and push all the Indian origin voters decisively in favor of the Tories. And that is what made people started realizing that, there is something which might have a change, but it's not happening. But mind you, it has probably not happened because of Joe Biden and Joe Biden's association with Obama. Mr. Obama was pretty much so much liked by not just the American Indians, but Indian Indians within India as well. That association has a lot to do. But God forbid if it was a question of Mr. Bernie Sanders being the presidential candidate, I can tell you that his ideological or positioning lines, which were pretty much anti-India on so many issues, would have cracked the Indian emotional electorate in US in that way. So that's how I feel. But on third evening, please pull out the popcorns and see what happens, even though it might not be enjoyable for one single thing. That I do not really wish this to go into a really prolonged litigation, that the world power not having the legitimacy of their own people, that is not a good thing for the world stability at large. And right now in this corona scenario, and also the fact, the kind of misadventures that China is hell-bent upon making in, not just with India, but a time in a legal way, is not going to be a good